And there's rumors of deaths at the Everglades detention facility as well. We are aggressively working to try to confirm that. But I mean, when I was there and looked in, I did my best to make eye contact with every detainee, just so I can kind of just give them a sign that like, you're human, right? There's folks of every age.
Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup.
This is Ashley with Status Coup.
On the ground.
In Philadelphia.
Flint, Michigan. East Palestine, Ohio. Please support the leading independent news outlet on the ground.
Covering what the corporate media covers up. Hey, this is Ashley Bishop with Status Coup. I'm joined today by Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani. Thank you so much for being here, Anna. You have been very involved with oversight for the extremely controversial new immigration detention center in the Florida Everglades, the so-called Alligator Alcatraz. And you were part of the first group of representatives to head over there after it was first opened, and were denied access to the facility.
Here to demand access to this detention facility. Based on reports that we've been able to glean, the site is already experiencing flooding. The first individuals who have been detained with no due process have arrived. And it's so essential when you have hundreds of millions of public dollars being spent on a political stunt that we have the ability to see for our own eyes what is happening and to be the voices of our constituents.
Well, pursuant to Florida Statute 944.23 and 95.225, we don't have to arrange a tour. We actually get to pop up here.
Right now, I was told that I could give you a phone number, I could call somebody else.
And so unfortunately, that's not the law. Right?
We can't go in because there's safety concerns for us lawmakers, but there's no regard for those detainees who are here.
I don't believe that was what I said, sir. I said that to bring visitors in and give them a tour at this time. And then the decision has been made that is an unsafe condition.
So to be clear, we're denied access.
Since then, you and some other representatives were able to take a sort of planned scripted tour through the facility. I believe that was last Friday, so almost a week now ago. And I wanted to talk to you about the accountability work that you and your small team have been doing, for the facility. I think it's extremely important that we stay on this, and the work that you do have been doing again has been extremely important and valuable. But before we get into the kind of like accountability angle of this, I wanted to see if we could talk a little bit about conditions inside the facility. As you know, it's been extremely hard to actually get any kind of information about what's going on inside there for detainees, even for people who are staffing the facility. Even immigration lawyers are having a hard time getting in touch with their clients who are detained in that center. So I especially wanted to talk about reports that we heard over this last week about detainees being relocated, possibly due to flooding, possibly due to an expectation of continued flooding, because, we know in this area of Florida during this time of year, there's a lot of heavy rains and potential hurricanes and all that stuff. So, not unusual for this time of year. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. What can you tell us about, what you've learned about conditions inside the facility as of now?
Well, thanks so much for the invitation to be here. And yes, we've been very busy
Absolutely.
And focused on shutting down this detention center, and in the process of working to shut it down, doing a lot of digging on the facts and connecting with families who have loved ones who are detained, and also speaking to those who are detained directly. With that said, on the facilities piece, so as you noted, after we made an unannounced visit to the Everglades detention facility, members of Congress were attempting to do the same. Now, we were denied that access on bogus claims of safety, which our response was, it was not safe for us to visit. How is it safe for people to be detained there or work there? But fast forward to members of Congress kind of following our lead and making their own unannounced visit. That was somehow leaked to the state. And when the state found out, they decided to schedule their own scripted tour to prevent another PR disaster of members of Congress being denied access. And as much as the state tried to sanitize the experience, there's no way you can sanitize people being caged. And this facility is essentially tents on top of tents. It is tent city. These are the same type of tents you would see at any other public function or outdoor event. They're maybe 6 inches off the ground. There is air conditioning being pumped through these tents, but it's basically through plastic tubes with holes cut into them. It's not insulated. It's not something where the air is going to really sustain itself when you have hundreds of bodies in one space. And these are full-blown cages. I mean, you are caged on all four sides and on the top. 32 men in one cage, 3 metal toilets with 3 phones next to them. And of course, we're already hearing stories of these facilities not working. And not only is that because of just the large usage of them, but the reality is that this is in the middle of the Everglades. There's no running water. There's no power grid. Everything is generators. Water is trucked in and out. And of course, the mosquitoes are incredibly intense. And I say that as a born and raised Floridian, I'm very used to mosquitoes, but this is a very different degree of insect involvement, if you will. It is, it surrounds you, and they're indoors and outdoors. There's just no way to get away from the mosquitoes. With all that said, I do think it's worth amplifying that we were not allowed to speak to any detainees during this scripted tour. Though, of course, I tried, but every time I tried, I was stopped by security, and you're balancing the risk of also being removed from this tour. And we really wanted to make sure we got as many questions answered as we could while we were there. But they let us gaze into one of these tents full of people. And the second these doors swung open, we were greeted with private security, and every staff member there is contract. These are not folks who have any background in immigration law, enforcement, or even how to run a correctional institution. You know, they're being paid more than state correctional officers now. And it's basically the same type of private security you'd find anywhere else. And so they stood in front of us, arms crossed, not letting us have any ability to walk into the tent. But the second the door swung open, all of the men being detained started yelling at us. They started asking for help. They started chanting freedom in Spanish. They were pointing out their water, saying the water was bad, yelling their names to us for help and assistance. I mean, it was a very intense experience in that regard. And of course, further reinforcing for me the importance of closing down this detention facility, especially since we know hundreds of those who were there have no criminal record at all. Now, to your second question about relocation. So this is where things get even more vague. So when we were there, the director of the Department of Emergency Management, because this is being managed by the same department that should be focused on hurricanes. And I'll use FDM as the acronym to keep it simple. But the director, his name is Kevin Guthrie, and he's the one who gave us this tour. And he told us during the tour that every person here had a deportation order, which is not true. We know that's not true. He also said that everyone is going to be deported within 2 weeks. Now, this is where things, I think, might intersect with the relocations that are happening. And I'm purely speculating here. But the 2-week mark was basically yesterday and the day before. That's when individuals started arriving. And it doesn't seem like anyone has been deported. I mean, that's based on intel I have from people who used to work there, from people who are inside. It doesn't seem like anyone was actually deported. And so I think what might also be happening is folks are getting relocated to other detention facilities like Chrome in Miami because they actually do not have a deportation order. Maybe the federal government doesn't want to engage deportations for the lawsuit that's also pending, which I can explain in great detail if helpful. But long story short, yes, the place is flooding. Yes, the place is not safe for people to be working there or detained there. But I actually don't think the state of Florida cares about safety. And so I think if they're going to relocate people, it's likely due to this administrative dynamic where they were wrong on deportations, or because the 2-week mark had passed, they're bringing people to federal facilities. But there's just a huge question mark on what's happening. And of course, families are scared and overwhelmed. And we're actively digging into this alongside the contracts and other issues. But there is a huge lack of clarity, and it's very unsettling.
And as far as, deaths in these facilities go, I believe that there's been 11 deaths in these immigration detention centers since January, since Trump took office. 5 of those have happened in Florida. 3 of those 5, I believe, happened in Chrome. So, to your point, these facilities, not just Alligator Alcatraz, but all of these other facilities, they have harrowing conditions there as well.
Yeah. And there's rumors of deaths at the Everglades detention facility as well. We are aggressively working to try to confirm that. But I mean, when I was there and looked in, I did my best to make eye contact with every detainee just so I can kind of just give them a sign that, like, you're human, right? There's folks of every age. I mean, there's folks with gray hair, gray beards, like folks who are our elders who were there, all the way to, of course, folks, incredibly young. And so, I mean, it's just the health needs of that of that wide of a span of age is very real. And we are hearing stories that there's a lack of medicine, that folks aren't getting their diabetic medicine and inhalers and so forth. And so there's a private health contract as well called See Your Health, providing the health services. But again, health services as they are today in state prisons is horrifying. It's also privatized in Florida. And it's based on making money, and just, I guess, like the entire healthcare industry. But in this case, the way these contracts typically work is that you get a sum of money as a contractor. Anything you don't spend, you keep. And so it's not on reimbursements, right? It's not like they charge your insurance or something. So these companies have an incentive to be as cheap as possible. And so if you have an issue, let's just say with your eyes, they're going to say, okay, well, which eye do you want to protect, the left or the right one? We're not going to take care of both of them, right? Like, that's the reality in the prison system today. And of course, it's just going to be even worse when you have these types of pop-up detention facilities. So we have to talk about it more. We have to shine a light on it, and we have to care. I mean, I think that's a part of it too, is we really have to care. I can't tell you how many interracial couples I've spoken to where the husband is an immigrant, the wife is American, and a lot of these folks have just never experienced these situations before. They're shocked by it, but they're also activated to want to get more involved, want to do more. But there's so many families that just have lived their lives not thinking about this and now find themselves in this crisis. And it's just very important for that sense of urgency to be sustained, even after we close this facility, because I'm committed to closing it. That pressure around conditions and around accountability and around contracts for the detainment, I mean, all of that has to be maintained. It can't just disappear after this.
I cannot imagine how despairing it must be to have your spouse subject to all of this, especially if you feel like you haven't hit into that before. And on, we've also been hearing reports of deaths at Alligator Alcatraz. Similarly, we have not been able to get any kind of confirmation on them. There's also, I think Miami Herald put out a report this morning that we had also heard, again, last week, that I wasn't able to verify, because all of this stuff, there is no public accountability. It's extremely difficult to get any kind of information. But there were reports that there were minors in there. And I believe Miami Herald reported that there is a 15-year-old. I guess it's important to note, like, Alligator Alcatraz is supposed to be a temporary housing facility. So, it would make sense that they're then moving people to different facilities that don't, I guess, have the same restrictions.
Correct. Now, part of the dynamic too, right, is there's a lot of debate over who's actually paying for this facility, who's responsible for it. Now, obviously, we know that this will be taxpayer funded, whether it's state or federal. So at the end of the day, taxpayers are who's impacted by this, but nothing's been reimbursed at this time. And a part of this dynamic is, despite the initial comments being made by the governor that this was going to be reimbursed by FEMA, a lawsuit was filed by the Friends of the Everglades and the Center for Biological Diversity, charging this immigration center of breaking federal environmental law. And as a result, you saw the federal government in their response to this lawsuit say, this is not our facility, we have nothing to do with this, et cetera, et cetera. This is a legal tactic. The federal government is trying to distance themselves from this facility not because they oppose it. I mean, Trump toured it before it was open, but they're trying to create a loophole for this lawsuit. They're trying to get this lawsuit tossed out. So part of our attempt, especially with this tour that was scheduled, was asking tough questions to get the state to admit federal connections. And not only did we get Kevin Guthrie to share with us that DHS had requested this facility, but he also made comment that ICE inspectors have been on site. He said that when the detainees arrive, that ICE gives them a log of this person, which I actually don't think is true, but that's a different situation. But either way, I signed on as a witness to the Everglades lawsuit based on what was said. And I'm hoping it helps the lawsuit stay the course, because the federal government is lying in a lot of ways, surprise, surprise, as is the state of Florida. Right. But they are operating this detention center in the shadows because they don't want due process. They don't want the law to apply. And when you create this uncertainty of, well, is this state or is this federal, it makes it harder for advocates and activists to actually stop it. And so we are exploring every legal opportunity, and more lawsuits are going to be filed. But it's purposefully vague to make it harder for us to do that.
Okay, yeah. I spoke with one of the senior attorneys for Center for Biological Diversity, who is one of the co-plaintiffs on that lawsuit just a couple hours ago. And we talked a lot about the environmental angle of the lawsuit. Is there anything else that you can share about the lawsuit at this time?
Well, a judge was assigned, and I believe there will be a hearing next week. This is a very slow-moving lawsuit for some reason, but we're hoping for a fast response once a judge actually hears the arguments. There's no way there is an environmental impact. I mean, I was able to find a contract that has since been removed from the state website, but it outlines $11 million being spent on asphalt and being spent on a road. And I was on that road, and when I drove into the detention facility in my car, that the front entrance, if you will, of this detention facility is about 2 miles away from the actual facility itself. So they built a newly paved road and a newly paved parking lot, and that is going to have environmental impact. And then, of course, just the fact that you have trucks going in and out, you have the impact of people being there, you have the impact of vendors and just waste and so forth. Fossil fuels being pumped into the air, the light pollution. The light pollution is excessive, and so I'm very hopeful about this lawsuit. But again, there's been many lawsuits filed. The ACLU filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of those detained for not being able to access their attorneys. We filed a lawsuit demanding the state of Florida give us unfettered access to this detention facility. And there's more lawsuits to be explored. I mean, first of all, what jurisdiction does the state of Florida even have to follow and enforce a federal law? There's no clarity on, I mean, we were told that the FDM does not have a 287G agreement. So what law are they leaning on as a state entity to detain people on federal policy? So that's going to be a potential lawsuit. And the other issue that I have concerns about, and I'll be digging more into in the hours ahead, has to do with the actual powers the governor is using to even do this. So the governor is weaponizing his executive authority through emergency powers based on a 2023 executive order. This executive order was put into place because there were individuals, asylum seekers, who arrived in the Keys from Haiti. And so he called this emergency because of this situation. He has since renewed it every 60 days, even though the emergency no longer exists. Not only do you not have individuals presenting at the Keys, but you also have a dramatic reduction at the U.S. border of those who are arriving. And then, of course, based on this EO, President Biden was mentioned and attacked. No more President Biden. And so why does this EO have any relevancy right now? So we're also going to be exploring that tactic. And I will say, as Democrats in the Florida House, we did try to roll back his emergency powers many times.
Mhm.
In fact, we filed an amendment to say he can only call for emergency powers if it's a natural disaster. And of course, that amendment failed because the Florida legislature is a supermajority Republican right now in both chambers.
Mhm.
But I do want folks to know that we've been watching this for a long time and do what we can to raise the alarm bells and pull back his authority. But when you're in a situation like Florida, where every branch of government is dominated by one party, it's just really hard to stop any of this proactively because we don't have the numbers.
I mean, yeah, there is so much going on with this. If we had a little bit more time, I would ask some follow-ups, just on these lawsuits and all that. But I know that our time is kind of limited, so I want to move on to some of the contractors, because
Yeah,
that's a big part of the story and really important. So
the money is
you.
returned.
Absolutely. And, for all of these immigration detention centers, just like a quick aside, like
Right.
that is an important part of this story. It's not, obviously it's about racism. It's about, all of that stuff, but it's also about money. And that's, something that we don't talk about as much as we should. So you have been posting on social media about a relatively new emergency and disaster response company, CRS, which won a lucrative $78.5 million contract, no bid contract with the government to run the facility. So CRS, as far as I can tell, has no experience running any similar facilities, and their main kind of connection to the DeSantis administration seems to be through a lobbying firm, Ballard, which seems to be very powerful in the state of Florida. So can you talk a little bit about CRS, what we actually know about them, and why they're running this facility seems to be very problematic?
For sure. I mean, there's several problematic contracts, and they're all no bid, and they're all given to, for the most part, friends of Governor Ron DeSantis and friends of the Republican Party of Florida, donors of these political entities as well. You mentioned Ballard Partners. They're a law firm and lobby firm that is very closely aligned with President Trump. And so a lot of these folks also have connections to the DeSantis administration. In fact, one of the lobbyists for SRS used to be the chief of staff for Governor Ron DeSantis. So a lot of lines here. And a lot of these companies, they also have a track record in Florida connected to these political individuals, but they changed their names as well. So I think it's important to note that, a company might sound new, but they potentially had a former name and flipped. But at the end of the day, these are large contracts the public needs to be aware of, and there needs to be accountability. And so, to your point, I watch. There's these two websites called Facts and Flare. They're both acronyms, and they're essentially public websites maintained by the Department of Financial Services, which is housed under the Chief Financial Officer of the state of Florida. And all contracts get uploaded here. It is a pretty non-controversial website. It's kind of one of those important but misunderstood government websites where folks just don't know it exists and don't check in unless they need to. And then you go to it and it's not as user-friendly as it probably could be. But I check this website all the time. I was introduced to it when I first got elected. And of course, my first thoughts when we got news of this detention facility was, well, who's building it? Where are these contracts going? And a lot of our on the ground folks were taking photos of trucks going in and out, trying to chase contractors that way. But ultimately, the most effective way to follow the money is to look at the receipts, and it is state law to upload those receipts. And so once I saw these contracts post, I immediately grabbed them, as you mentioned, shared them online. And it was not surprising to see how excessive these payments are, but it was important to really get a better picture of how much public money is actually being spent on this. And of course, who's getting those contracts. And so since then, the state of Florida has pulled these contracts off the websites. And I discovered that because, after I posted these contracts on my social media to raise alarm bells, a lot of reporters started asking me, where did I find them? Did I get them through a public records request? And, of course, I have made many public records requests as well. I'm not expecting them to get filled quickly, but that's not where these came from. These came from just searching the Facts and Flare website because we checked them, like I said, aggressively. and reporters were having trouble finding it. And so when I checked, I realized, oh, the PDFs are gone. And so, since then, I reached out to the CFO's office from that perspective of the frame, because they manage this website. And I received a phone call, and I was told that they do not manage the uploading or removal of contracts. They just manage the website itself. But that is the agencies who are in charge of that component. So of course I went back to the agency and had already asked them earlier this week what is going on. They said they'd get back to me. I sent them a more formal email this morning about it. And of course, waiting to hear back. But I think it's pretty clear what's happening. They're evading transparency. They know that this spending is inappropriate and excessive, and they're pulling it back. Meanwhile, the CEOs of these contractors and the executive teams are also scrubbing their websites. They're scrubbing their websites that list their leadership team. They're locking down their social media accounts. And so my response is, if you're so damn proud of getting public money to maintain these facilities, and you're selling merchandise off of it, and I have a track record of working with Florida on such on emergency issues, if you will, then why are you hiding from the public now? So it's just further demonstrates to me how this detention center needs to close. It's a waste of public money, does not make anyone more safe, and it's allowing for the grift and the swamp to continue. I mean, it's literally a swamp in the swamp, and we have to call it out, and we have to do our best to expose how corrupt this entire situation is.
Yeah. Again, I would ask more about contractors if we had a little bit more time, but I do want to be able to ask you, you had mentioned very briefly about, the taxpayer burden that, for taxpayers of the state of Florida, this facility is costing a lot of money, despite, as you said, DeSantis's assurances that it would not. Can you talk to us a little bit about, in the time that we have left, about how much money this facility is going to cost taxpayers at a time when the government, their whole thing has become government efficiency, reducing government waste, all of that, and cutting social programs to allow for, government efficiency and all that, because apparently we have no money for that. We have no money to feed and house people, to provide health care for people. But instead, we have millions of dollars to spend on these detention facilities, not just in Florida, but all across the country. So can you talk a little bit more about how much this is costing taxpayers, again, in a time where we're being told we have no money for things that would actually improve people's lives?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that question, and this point can't be stressed enough. Don't believe a politician who says we can't afford that, because obviously we have the money. We just have a misplacement of those dollars, and this is one of the worst examples of that. We could be spending these dollars on affordable housing, food insecurity. We can pay teachers more, and yet here we have the governor spending what I predict will be over $500 million. This is. Right now, Kevin Guthrie and others, they're operating with a blank check. No one seems to care what the cost is. I mean, I forgot to mention that there's no working kitchen here. All the food is catered in. They put it into boxes, but they're not preparing meal on site. I mean, this is just not a stable or sustainable environment. It is a pop-up. Sure. And so it needs to pop down immediately, and it needs to close immediately. But the reality is that is by design going to be expensive, because again, you don't have any infrastructure to build off of. Everything's just from scratch. And they're building more tents right now. I mean, not only did they tell us that they want to expand to potentially 4,000 detainees, but those who are detained are telling us they hear the construction happening outside. And so this will cost, like I said, more than $500 million. There is going to be a situation where the governor might have to come to us as lawmakers to ask for more money. So we're going to be prepared to fight back against that if it takes place. But it is deeply, deeply concerning in the sense that we have so many other expenses as a state. And I think it's worth noting that despite both President Trump and Governor DeSantis talking about the affordability crisis. They're doing absolutely nothing to address it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Before I let you go, I just want to ask if there's anything else that you want to share with people about this facility, any other things that you find deeply concerning about, this immigration detention center, so-called Alligator Alcatraz in the middle of the Florida Everglades.
A few closing thoughts. I mean, the Miami Herald reported that hundreds of individuals who are here have no criminal background. And I've also witnessed that at the local level. Right now, Florida Highway Patrol has a 287G agreement. And so they've been deputized at 100% to operate as immigration enforcement. And they're pulling people over for minor traffic infractions, asking if they have a driver's license. If they don't, they're bringing you to the county jail. And I've met with detainees at the county jail here in Orange County, 40 men in a cell, and none of them have any criminal backgrounds. They are construction workers, they're plumbers, they're roofers, and their families. They're family people. They have children. They are from all around the world. Many fled persecution and countries that are not stable to be here, to contribute to our economy, to pay taxes, raise a family. And so I just don't want folks to lose the human aspect here, because I think sometimes we get caught up in the facts around facilities, contracts, and so forth. And the reality is that Chrome Detention Center is also horrifying. I mean, I spent an hour speaking to a former detainee. He was able to bond out with $7,500 that his family had to find. He has an ankle monitor right now, but he went to Chrome. He was in Colorado. So he gave me a really great insight to what his experience was like. And it was horrifying in Chrome. And so I think we also just need to be really aggressive on this point that all the attention is going to the Everglades for the obvious reasons. It should not exist. But let's be clear. There's a horrible track record of all of our detention centers and correctional facilities, whether it's state, federal, or county, but especially in detention for immigration, there are people dying. There have always been people dying, and oftentimes we don't give it the attention that it deserves. And so I do want to amplify that there needs to be systemic changes across the board. And part of this too is, of course, supporting a pathway to citizenship for those that are in the United States, who are working hard, who have not committed a crime, to have a path forward. That needs to be a part of the conversation nationally. But I don't want to negate the horrifying experiences of these other detention facilities that people are having. And obviously I'm a state representative, so I have more jurisdiction over state facilities. But I do urge members of Congress to be more proactive on all of the incarceral environments, because it is our responsibility to ensure the health and safety of those who are in these situations. And we are feeling on that front in every single way.
And yeah, I appreciate you underscoring the conditions that people are in, just regular working people who came here to give their family, to give themselves a better life, to get more opportunities for their children. That's why people are here. And it's extremely, just despairing that this is the US for them. This is the US for them. And for some people, it could potentially be the last look at the US is an immigration detention center.
Yeah, so, you got it.
Yeah, so I'm not going to keep you for any longer, but thank you so much. Representative Anna Eskamani, again, your small team has been doing a lot of work to make sure people know what's going on inside of this facility and hopefully get it shut down. So again, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for explaining this and letting us know what you know. We will be staying on this story. So for viewers, please keep an eye out on our reporting on this, because we will be staying on it. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.